everyone. Welcome back to the Festival of Storytellers. Thank you for still tuning in. And you already have watched the pre-recorded session of Mr. Scott Harrell with his book Moonluck. Actually, we already featured Sir Scott Harrell yesterday with Miss Eleanor Gacheta. And for the pre-recorded session earlier, we also saw him talk about his book Moonluck with another author, Miss Ellie Gacheta, as his moderator. And we have learned a lot of things from Mr. Scott Harrell's book and also his life. Um, the book of Moonlight was actually talking about exploring the moon, as we already have seen it, always seen it rotating around us. And I mean, um, as we talked about yesterday with Mr. Scott Harrell, he's actually been really interested on exploring a lot about the moon and uh, how we can know more about it, and we can put stations there. And he was also talking about USA, China, and Russia on discovering the moon with the other side. Like there's the side of the moon that we haven't seen yet, and um that's what they called like the dark side of the moon, as we haven't seen it yet. So everyone was actually really interested in learning more about the moon and also learning more about Mr. Conrail. If you're really interested on that stuff, you can actually buy his book and get a copy on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and also his website, scottcarell.com, and you can learn more about Mr. Scott Carell and his book. As Scott Carell did mention earlier on the pre-recorded session, he aims for the U.S. to be able to go to the moon also before China, and already Russia has been there and has their own stations and stuff. But on his book, it's actually a fictional book about living in the moon, having a station, and discovering a lot of things while you're in the moon, trying to build community on the moon. And also, he did mention about maybe having plants on the moon, not physically planting like the food, vegetables, and everything on the moon, but actually having like a greenhouse or a station that can be like planted and provide food for the people who are actually habiting there in the moon. As we can all see that the moon is actually really interesting and fascinating, as we always see it while walking at night, even sometimes in the daytime, like a little bit when the sun rises, we can still see the moon. Actually, moon is symbolizing sometimes a little bit romantic, especially like when you're dating or something. You're usually having this kind of dinner where you can see the sky and the full moon and the stars. So it's actually really fascinating, as when sometimes you're walking, I was talking with my partner yesterday, Leah, that it's so fascinating. Well, when we're walking, the moon is always following, and you don't know why. And it's always like a question for the kids, and it's actually fun trying to outrun sometimes the moon while like walking or doing something. And I mean, everything who actually wants to learn more about moons and stuff is would probably really like to like have Mr. Scotcherell's book, Moon Luck, and they talked about a lot of discovering the moon also. Um, he will be able to inspire a lot of people as he talks about it. I mean, he was traveling a lot of places while he was like being inspired to do this. So he did mention that he's been traveling for around 40 um plus countries, and that's where he gets the ideas, learning more on different cultures, learning more on different people, different places, and that's what inspired him to try and write about this book. And as his book is talking about like an international, just not specifically talking about like the U.S., but he was his book actually talks a lot more like happening with China, Russia, and having them in one station, and also like trying to work with them while on the moon and sharing all the stories and being able to work with other people, not just your um, not just in like your own race, but also having other races uh, talking because having diversity as he was writing on the book. Because I mean, everyone needs to be able to like write those kind of books. There's actually a question from Mia, and I've seen the interview. Do you think it's possible for Moonlight to become a movie? Actually, a lot of there's a lot of questions for Mr. Harrell on that book because he did answer that one in his pre-recorded session and also in his interview with Eleanor Gacheta yesterday. Someone actually asked if his book would be able to be possible to become a movie, and he did says that he would actually be really quite excited if his book would be able to become a movie because it's also really great if it will become a movie. I mean, there's not a lot of stories or like movies about like living in the moon. There's um there's already like a movie about Mars, living in Mars, how hard it was like being alone in Mars. I think a lot of people already have seen it. Also, like there's a movie about an astronaut being trapped in Mars and living there, how he was able to make a living, like plant, like some fruits and stuff, so that he can like stay there for a couple of years before he was able to rescue. So it will be actually really be interesting if Moonlock will be able to become a movie. But hopefully, I think there's a lot of possibility that it will become a movie. I mean, it's also really interesting. I mean, Scott Farrell did mention on his pre-recorded session that he, before writing Moonlock, he was also writing some stories that he didn't publish, but actually one that he wrote for Star Trek before, like Star Trek, and he tried to sense this for like for being able to use in the movie, and he was quite actually quite excited about it because Star Trek is like an internet like a space thing movie that everyone actually really looking forward to, and he tried sending like a story that uh be able to be used, and he did mention also unfortunately that the story was actually accepted, and the director and producer was keeping it for them, but then unfortunately it was not able to it wasn't used because the movie was postponed or like stopped, and Scott Farrell did mention that if the movie Star Trek was continued, he was told that his story was gonna be used actually. So I think Moonhawk would have a great opportunity to become a movie because I mean there's a lot of stories and movies going on around about international space things, um, galaxies, spaceships, and like star systems, a lot of things like that. Because Mr. Scott Harrell did mention about a prequel for his book, because this is his first book, Moonlight, and uh, he's trying to finish sequel for this book, And the sequel will be containing the same thing with the Moonlock. Moonlight is about like stations, people are staying there, adventures and stuff. And the sequel will be also containing that, but it will be like 2 years later after like the Moonlight happened, and that's gonna be his prequel. And actually, he's actually mentioned about the prequel having a little bit of exploring on Mars. And Miss Eleanor Bacheta did actually ask him if he will be having a trilogy on will make a third book for this one, but he did mention that maybe he will be having a trilogy for his books as but first he needs to publish first his second the sequel for the Moonlock, and then maybe after that he will be having another book, a third book for going to Mars, because he's also been interested on having a third book about Mars, not just the moon. It's like exploring. I think Mr. Cotterell will be having a lot of books, not just after a second book, a third book. He might have a lot more uh, books, like fourth, fifth, or sixth, maybe exploring a lot more from the moon to the from the moon to Mars to maybe all of the planets in the solar system eventually. As here was really kind of interested on things going on like on our like solar system. And a lot of people would actually be really great to have this book as it will be inspired on learning more about things, realistic things going on around us as the moon, like discovering new faces of the moon and like things that we can explore with our technology. Because I mean, it wasn't even possible for us to reach like even outside of Earth before, but right now people we have a lot of stations outside of Earth and like rotating and then exploring the Earth. It was able even now we already have like um, rovers in Mars, and it's really really fascinating and really exciting as um we're going through like modernization and stuff, not just kind of like before, even phones, social media are happening really quite fast right now. Even before, because like before they didn't even have phones, they only used like email, mails, postcards, a lot of this kind of stuff. Even like for news, you can only hear it from like newspapers and read it now, and then it continued to have radios and now television. And after that, even televisions right now, it seems like televisions are getting older, and like we're using phones right now more than the televisions to watch news and everything else. So venturing more on the moon is actually one of the things like Mr. Scott Hurrell said that maybe 10 or like 20 years from now, we'll be able to like live on the moon instead of like just exploring it and having a lot more stations in there, like maybe traveling there. Like, I mean, right now, if it's possible to be a tourist in the moon, that would be actually really great. As yesterday also we did mention that it will be really nice if we can have like a travel agency for the moon, and everyone would be really excited for that. I mean, who doesn't like to like see the moon up close, such a walk in it, and have fun in there. I mean, who doesn't like that? So Mr. Scott Terrell mentioned that hopefully by 10 or like 20 years from now, everything will be more than maybe we'll be seeing like flying cars or something. But hopefully I can still live until that happens, or maybe if not by the near future also, because everything is really going towards the modernization, having conveniency, having like everything at your hand so fast. And also, Scott Hurl did mention of having like traveling throughout like 40 plus countries. I mean, it just actually, I would actually love to travel also on like at least even one, two, three countries, maybe at least. But he did travel like more than 40 countries, and he did mention that he always likes to go back to that Italian Alps. Alps is like a mountainous areas where you can see the stars, the sky, and everything widely. So that I think that's also one of his like um inspirations, or maybe like a there's what how he gets his uh time to spend his time on like going to and writing more about the moon, because he likes to travel a lot, getting to know more a lot of people. That's why his book Moonlight actually has a lot of diversity. He didn't just use one race, but he was also using a lot of things there on his book Moonlight. He did put like Russia, the China being friends and everything else. So that's what he got from like traveling a lot on different countries. Because I mean, who doesn't like to travel? I mean, it's really getting easier and easier now to travel. Before it's even really hard to get a passport. It's hard if you don't like book your own thing through and through in the office. But right now, everything is really convenient, and you can just plug and play. Like, go to your phone, search on which country you want, search on which places you want to go, tourist spots and stuff, and you'll be able to like get to know more about other countries. So after this session, actually, we'll be having another of your Miss Eleanor Beteta and Miss Joanne White. We always see these beautiful ladies, and hopefully everyone will be watching their other of the hour live session. They'll be talking about more of Miss and Joanne White's book, because last time they had another of the hour session yesterday, and they were talking about more of Eleanor Richardson. And right now, this beautiful two ladies will be always, I mean, hopefully everyone will be also watching their live session. And I'll be still here staying, and for the commentaries for the author of the hour, Mr. Miss Eleanor Richardson and Joanne White. And stay tuned for more stories and authors to
Commentaries on the Book of Wisdom by Russell Marlett. The source is a mystery that cannot be known. What is known is not all that is. Who would tell of it would deceive. Who would tell of it would seek power. Power is sought by priests and kings. Peace is sought by man. Peace comes when each is a priest and a king. Priests and kings must surrender all and serve others. All that is love is of the source. Love fulfills needs, not desires. Love can only be given. Love is. Love in action cannot be defeated. Love in inaction cannot be overcome. Armed with love, one cannot be destroyed. Know the source and be love. Moonluck by Wayne Scott Harrell. Commander Wedman was silent for a few moments. Eulogies were then given by other members of the crew who knew Bruce well. Jim Shepard was among them. They were touching and reflected upon his character. He had been a strong force who was going to be missed. He would be a part of what he loved. He would be a piece of the moon forever. As the service came to a close, each of the astronauts walked to the mound of moon rocks adjacent to Bruce's body. One by one, they leaned over and took a small single rock. If they were going to leave one of their own behind, Then they were also going to take a piece away. It could be seen on the monitor that back in Arlington, 7 formally dressed Marines presented the traditional 3-volley rifle salute. This was immediately followed by a Navy flyover of 4 F-21 fighters in the missing man formation. Once overhead, the tail jet peeled away from the other 3, signifying the fallen soldier. And then something truly spectacular occurred. As one of the servicemen commenced playing taps, Commander Wedman gave the nod to Sylvia Lavander. Sylvia turned on her laser equipment. It could not be seen at the moon. There is no atmosphere, no particles to reflect the light, but the focused beam of light made its way to Earth. In 1.3 seconds, leaving a visible red, white, and blue trail in the Earth's sky above Arlington, and touched upon the headstone marker of Bruce Holman. Every person in attendance at Arlington National Cemetery, as well as everyone watching the service around the world and on the moon, were in awe. It was a tribute to a single person like no other. Outland Exile by Walter Clark Boutwell. Malila used her new glass knife to cut herself free from her bonds. As she crept near the bole of a large dead tree, she realized that the Unity patrols would search at night. She was very nearly home. She moved out from behind the tree trunk. The lights were just meters away, silhouetted twin serpentine stalks, twisting and writhing above her in a complicated dance, a light surmounting each stalk like an eye. Turned down to inspect the ground. She could no longer breathe. The stench of ammonia hit her. Her eyes watered and her vision started to fade. She retched as the yellow lights halted and advanced toward her, emitting a scritching noise. The blow took her just below the ribcage. An arm snaked around her waist and began to drag her off. Dazed, she was surprised the yellow eyes began to fade in the night before the dead tree trunk blocked her view. A dark shape stood her up, pressing her against the rough bark. The form stooped and put an arm between her legs before painfully grabbing her wrist and hoisting her. Malila's world spun as she was turned upside down and bounced on the old man's shoulder back to their fire. Jesse dropped her with a thump onto the skins before turning on her. "Lil miss, I just want a little privacy, got mare." Then she was bargaining for, singing slight, "You damned unigot. Now I've got to burn out a death walker. The thing is gonna stink for days." "What exactly were you thinking, lass?" he shouted. When she didn't respond, the old man frisked her rapidly before tying her up. He built up the fire and transferred red coals onto a makeshift shovel made from tree bark before starting back down the path from which they just came. Sundering screams punctuated the darkness. Strange cries met the night and subsided into groaning agues of noise. Jesse returned to stroke the fire with fresh fuel, shoveled more coals out, and again disappeared into the dark. By the sounds, the old man was getting the worst of it before the creature's cries started to move off. The stench of smoke and ammonia sullied the air.
Real Prison, Real Freedom by Rosser MacDonald. Waldron was warden of the Eastham Unit of the Texas Department of Corrections, commonly called TDC. He began as a guard 14 years ago and became a warden 3 years ago, assigned to Eastham. He explained that's when he met Ricky Smith. Patterson asked, "Warden Waldron, does inmate Smith, to your knowledge, have a reputation inside of TDC?" His reputation is one of being unpredictable, extremely violent, murderous, uncontrollable. In your personal experience with inmate Smith, has that reputation been backed up? Yes. The prosecutor and the witness then went through a list of persons in the courtroom to establish that the judge, jurors, attorneys, investigator, and the court reporter were all only a few feet from the defendant and vulnerable if he should be able to attack. And in your experience, would he be the type that might use something sitting here on a table or here in the courtroom as a weapon? If he had access to it, yes, sir. In your opinion, would it be safe to have inmate Smith sitting here without restraints while witnesses testify from that box and while that jury was over there in this trial? Again, sir, considering the unpredictability of his behavior, no, sir, I do not believe it would be safe for these people. In cross-examination, defense attorney Durrance tried to soften the harshness of the warden's assertion by asking him if he knew of any time that Ricky Smith had attacked a judge or jurors or anyone else in a courtroom. The warden admitted that he did not know of Smith being violent outside of prison. Durrance had the warden describe how 6 armed prison guards, as well as the court bailiff, were positioned near the defendant and around the courtroom. Then they described the routine of searching inmate Smith and going through a metal detector before entering the courtroom. Then the prosecution called in John Bonner, Assistant Regional Director of TDC in charge of transportation and security of inmates for medical and court appointments. Over defense objections, Patterson asked, in terms of other inmates' reputations that you know of in TDC regarding violence and assaultedness, where would this man's range? Bonner stated firmly, he would be one of the most assaultive that we have in TDC. How many people are you aware of that he has stabbed since he's been in TDC? Durrance stood to his feet. Your Honor, I would object. I think this brings in extraneous offenses. Judge Whitaker looked at the attorney. It would be a good objection before the jury, but before the court, it's overruled. Bonner stated, personally, I am aware of about 5 officers that he has assaulted. Patterson then had Bonner describe how inmate Smith had brought a knife into a disciplinary hearing, and even though he had been searched, stabbed 2 officers. The setting was compared to the current courtroom scene. With the safety of the judge, the witnesses, the court reporter, the jurors, and the other people inside the bar. Would the safety of these people be in serious jeopardy if inmate Smith was left without restraints?